If you ever wondered if you're actually getting the right nutrients during pregnancy, or you felt overwhelmed by all of the conflicting nutrition advice that is out there, or maybe you're postpartum and you're still feeling depleted, even though you're trying to eat healthy, this episode is going to give you so much clarity, because today I am joined by Lily Nichols, and we are talking all about what most women, what most moms are missing when it comes to fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum nutrition. And we're going to dive into how to support your body in a way that actually makes sense. Enjoy today's episode. Feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, or like you've lost yourself in the postpartum chaos? Whether you're 4 weeks postpartum, 2 years in, or done having babies, you deserve to feel like yourself again. Hey mama, I'm Val, a functional sports dietitian, postpartum fitness coach, and a mama who understands exactly what you're going through. Welcome to the Strong Nourished Momma Podcast, where you'll find simple, science-backed strategies to heal your core, rebuild strength, and restore your energy without the overwhelm. If you're ready to go from depleted to strong, nourished, and unstoppable, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Strong and Nourished Momma Podcast. I am so happy that you're here. Today's episode is such an important one because we're diving into something that actually impacts every single stage of motherhood, from fertility to pregnancy to postpartum recovery. And can you guess what it is? Yes, it is nutrition. It is nutrition. Of course it is. But not in this like overwhelming or restrictive way. It's in a way that actually supports your body, your energy, and your long-term health. Today, I am joined by Lily Nichols, who I totally look up to. I've read her books and I admire her, and I'm so grateful to be able to have her on the podcast and to share her knowledge with you today. Lily Nichols is a registered dietitian nutritionist, a certified diabetes educator, researcher, and author with a passion for evidence-based nutrition. Her work is known for being research-focused, thorough, and sensible. She is the founder of the Institute for Prenatal Nutrition, co-founder of the Women's Health Nutrition Academy, and the author of 3 books: Real Food for Fertility, co-authored with Lisa Hendrickson-Jack, Real Food for Pregnancy, and Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. Lily's best-selling books have helped hundreds of thousands of mamas and babies, are used in university-level maternal nutrition and midwifery courses, and have even influenced prenatal nutrition policy internationally. She writes at her blog, lilynicholsrdn.com. I'm going to share that in the show notes, don't worry. And when she steps away from writing, you can find her spending time with her husband and 2 children, most likely outside or in the kitchen. In this episode, we talk about the biggest nutrition gaps women are facing, why blood sugar matters beyond gestational diabetes, and what moms actually need to focus on without overcomplicating everything. This is one of those episodes that will help you take a deep breath and feel more confident in how you are nourishing your body. And I'm so excited for you to be able to take all this knowledge. You're probably going to listen to it again. I know I will. And be sure to check out the show notes to be able to find out how you can connect with Lily. Enjoy the episode. Hi, Lily. Welcome to the Strong and Nourished Momma Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm so happy that you're here. One, I'm a huge fan. I love your work. I have all of your books. And 2, I think the moms listening in today are really going to benefit from all of this information and from this conversation. So thank you. And before we dive in, I would love if you could share a little bit about what led you to focus on your work specifically when it comes to fertility, pregnancy, and postpartum.
I mean, it kind of happened a little bit organically. I got into the food space because I like food, I like cooking. I kind of wanted to be a baker once upon a time, but it was like, you're not going to be very healthy if you just eat cookies and cakes and pies all day. So I went into the nutrition side of things really as somebody who likes food, but also wants to use food as a means of, feeling good in my body. And the prenatal side of things kind of developed organically. I had the opportunity to work with the California Diabetes and Pregnancy Program, where we worked on gestational diabetes at the policy level, and also worked at a perinatology office where I was the, lead dietitian and also ran their gestational diabetes program. And it was in those roles that I really got excited about working in the pregnancy space, knowing that the health of the mom, what she eats, where her blood sugar levels are at, and all of that can play a huge role in the development of the baby and also that baby's lifelong health. They call it fetal programming, but you can like affect the development of a baby's pancreas, their metabolic health, their risk of type 2 diabetes and obesity. A lot of that stuff to some degree is pre-programmed by the environment in which that baby develops. So it was really in those roles that I was like, okay, this is an area that I think is valuable to work. And it was also in those roles that I became, more involved on a day-to-day basis on looking at guidelines and assessing guidelines and also seeing how those guidelines work in real life practice. Or was like, okay, there's a lot of room for improvement here, but there's also a lot of red tape on a bureaucratic level trying to make changes to policies. So while I'm proud of what I was able to contribute to those policies, they didn't get to the level that I would like to see and what actually worked in practice. So this is why I find myself in a place, I've written 3 books. The first one, Real Food for Gestational Diabetes, was really going through all the things that I found worked in practice and then providing the evidence to back them up. And it's kind of just snowballed from there. I mean, most of my work has focused on women in the childbearing years. So before, during, and after pregnancy, trying to optimize nutrient intake and lifestyle habits for mom to feel her best during her pregnancy, but also for baby to develop, as optimally as we possibly can. Like, we can't control everything, but we can, stack the deck in our favor for the best possible outcomes.
That's amazing. And it's really cool to be able to I connect all three, the prenatal or preconception period, pregnancy period, and the postpartum. So I'm really excited to kind of talk about all of that today and get some more information. And I think most women assume that nutrition starts, or what they should start to focus on their nutrition and their diet once they see that positive pregnancy test, and they see it and they're like, oh, okay, now I have to change everything that I'm doing, and I have to change my nutrition, which of course can be hard in the first trimester. But your work really highlights that it's going to be much earlier than when you're getting that pregnancy test. So can you explain why nutrition matters before we get that pregnancy test result?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll start out with, half of pregnancies in the United States are not planned. So there's no bad time to look at improving your diet. However, we do have to acknowledge fertility challenges are on the rise. It's affecting approximately 1 in 6 couples. There's both a male and a female factor for it. So it's not all the onus of this falls on the woman. But when we look at it from, okay, how can we increase our chances of conceiving quicker? Like, by the time we've decided, okay, I'm ready, I want to have a baby. Can we, speed up that timeline a little bit so improve our chances any given menstrual cycle? Can we reduce the risk of something like an early pregnancy loss or miscarriage? And a lot of those have to do with abnormalities in the genetics of the sperm or the egg. And actually, yes, we can influence that to some degree with nutrition and lifestyle. Some happens at random. As I already said, we can't control every outcome. A lot of them occur at random, but some of them can tie back to things like sperm DNA damage, right? They can measure it as DNA fragmentation. And those are things that we do have some impact on. So if we kind of rewind the clock looking at, okay, how could we improve egg quality? You go back 220 days before that egg is ovulated, where your body is recruiting an underdeveloped follicle in the ovaries, and then over those many months developing it into an egg that's ready to be ovulated and possibly fertilized. So that's a longer lead up than most people think about. For sperm, it's a little over 70 days. So, around the 3-month mark or so. we also need to think about not only, sperm and egg, but what is the home that a fertilized egg is going to implant into, which is the uterine lining, the endometrium. There's a reason that when individuals undergo, an egg transfer or something, they actually measure in these fertility clinics often the endometrial thickness before they bother with it. Because if the endometrium is too thin, the chances of implantation being successful are very low. So they're not going to bother wasting the money and time and resources and stress and all the things that go into it when the endometrium isn't even thick enough to receive, right? So we need to be thinking about that as well. Like, ultimately, your endometrium is the lining you're building up every month in your menstrual cycle. So you can actually see an approximation of like how healthy your endometrium is by the quality and length and heaviness of your flow over your cycle too. So it's like, we need to just be looking a little bit further back. Like, at the end of the day, our fertility is really just a reflection of our overall health. And you often see fertility challenges show up when there's other underlying health issues going on. It's simply that fertility is one of the first areas that our body pulls back resources for when it is under stress and needs to allocate those resources to other essential keeping you alive functions in your body. So if we just have a bit of a broader, I think, view of fertility, we can make a bigger impact. And, some of the things that can go wrong in a pregnancy, a lot of times they're things that have gone wrong from the very start. So things like the endometrial thickness and receptivity, things like egg quality, things like the risk of a congenital anomaly, like a neural tube defect is a good example. The neural tube is closing within a week or two of the earliest time that you can get a positive pregnancy test. So we know that is affected by our nutrient status, like folate, B12, choline, betaine, glycine, B6. There's a whole slew of nutrients that are a risk factor for neural tube defects. And so if you're only changing your diet in that like week or two, that's not enough time to optimize the levels of all of those nutrients. So if we want to come out the gate making sure fetal development is happening, as best as possible, at least in the level that we do have some control over, thinking about preconception nutrient status is where it's at.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So you said about 70 days for sperm, and I think that's important for us to remember. It's not all on the woman, and the male's health and of course the sperm quality and health are important. And then for women, 220 days. So it's a good amount of time to really beforehand, right? Especially if you do have an unplanned pregnancy. Like you were saying, a lot of pregnancies are going to be unplanned. So you mentioned some nutrients. Any other nutrients specifically that you would like to focus on? I know it's really overall like a whole foods diet, which we can kind of dive into, but any other specific nutrients that are especially impactful during this, let's say 220 days before you want to try and get pregnant?
Yeah, so I mentioned some micronutrients, right? Vitamins and minerals. The ones that I specifically mentioned tend to be the ones most involved in methylation. And many of those nutrients we're primarily getting from protein-rich animal foods and really high nutrient density plant foods like leafy greens and legumes. Like for folate, for example, leafy greens, legumes, and liver are actually our best sources of dietary folate. So you can look at it from two ways, the individual nutrients, or you can look at it sort of from a broad, what are the foods that are providing the highest concentration of all of these different nutrients? And either way, you kind of end up in the same place. Some specific areas I like to focus on are improving and increasing the amount of protein that women are consuming, including a mix of both those animal and plant proteins. I just mentioned beans and legumes, but our animal foods have a lot of nutrients that are not necessarily present in plant foods or present in the same concentrations. And some of those nutrients play a really impactful role in egg quality, like carnitine, taurine, creatine. These are all amino acids that we specifically get in animal foods that contribute really greatly to both egg quality and also sperm quality. I'm also looking at fat-soluble nutrients, vitamins A, E, D, and K, especially vitamins A, E, and D. With D, you're primarily getting it from sun exposure. You get some in animal foods, but really like our physiology is designed so that we're getting most of it from sun exposure. So depending on where you live and the time of year, that can be a bit of a challenge. So there is a time and a place for supplementation on that nutrient. Vitamin A, if you're eating animal sourced foods and not taking all the fat out of it, you're in a good place for getting enough vitamin A. Vitamin E, similarly, but also considering having some nuts and seeds in the diet as well, and just limiting our intake of highly refined like seed and vegetable oils, which use up our vitamin E stores quicker and increase the dietary requirement of vitamin E. It's a topic not many people talk about, but it's a legitimate area that you want to be thinking about the quality of the fats in your diet. I don't know. There's a whole slew of nutrients that I could go into. So, I mean, I'm a proponent overall of an omnivorous diet made of as many nutrient-dense foods as possible of both plant and animal origin. So not taking out all the parts of foods and separating them in a way that you're now not getting sufficient nutrient intake. So when you eat eggs, eat them with the yolk. When you eat dairy products, they should have some fat in them still. Don't take out all the fat. When you're eating animal foods, get a mix of different types of animal foods, including some seafood. There's a heavy role for DHA and in egg and sperm quality and also optimal fetal development. And that's the primary source, right? So getting a mix, an array of fresh produce, huge for getting our antioxidants, our folate, our potassium. So just trying to, move in that real food to displace some of the processed foods. Like you can make it really complicated. And I do go into lots and lots of data in my books, but at the end of the day, like we're in a situation where 60% of calories eaten by the average American are ultra processed foods. So any like shift in the direction of more whole foods is going to be a net benefit to your nutrient intake and to your fertility.
Definitely. And I think thinking, I try to encourage my clients to get a little bit curious and think of ways they can add to the diet versus taking away. Especially, during pregnancy, I think sometimes a lot of moms will think of, well, what can I eat? I can't eat this. I can't eat that. I can't eat this. And so if we think about, okay, well, what can we add, especially in that preconception period when we're thinking of fertility for when you do want to start trying, looking at a whole foods diet, incorporating both plants and animal foods, which I totally encourage as well, because like you said, it's not just about the individual nutrient. You're getting so much more when you're eating the whole food. And then also making sure you're not skimping out on the fat, which I think a lot of women do, unfortunately, even in that preconception time, right? They're thinking about fat or other things. And then by the time they think when they want to get pregnant, it's a totally different story maybe. But I think it's good to be able to focus on that whole foods approach. And if you can't, it's very overwhelming, as you mentioned. And so just making little small changes here and there can make a big impact. You talked about folate. Can you explain to the listener the difference between folate and folic acid?
Yeah, so this topic is unnecessarily controversial, but in my opinion, first we have to define some terms. So folate is an umbrella term. It refers to any type of folate. In our food supply, there's 150 different types of naturally occurring folate. The majority of what you find in food is in the form known as methylfolate. You can also get folate in other forms, so both supplementally or what has been added to the food supply. So namely, folic acid is a man-made compound. You don't find it naturally occurring in food, but it is fortified into refined grains. So grains will have a little bit of folate, but when you refine them and take out all the fiber and turn it into white flour, you don't have any more folate in there. And they fortify most of the refined grain supply with folic acid and some other nutrients. The challenge is how your body uses these different forms of folate. So if you look at what is the type of folate that is circulating in the blood supply, circulating in the fetal blood supply, incorporated into red blood cells, 95 to 98% of that is methylfolate. The folic acid is a form of folate that has no biological role in the body. It's not usable by the body. You absorb it very well, which is one of the reasons that people who are pro folic acid are like, this is the greatest thing ever invented, because you absorb more of it than food folate. It's a simpler molecule. There's less things that need to be taken off of it before your body absorbs it. So it's absorbed very well, but it doesn't function metabolically in your body until it goes through several enzymatic steps that convert it into methylfolate. Okay. So what happens is when you are taking in a fair amount of folic acid, some of it, yes, your body can convert into methylfolate, and some of that, how efficiently your body does that conversion is based on some of your genetics. If you've ever heard MTHFR thrown around, this is a gene that encodes for an enzyme that methylates folate, and some people have variation in that slows down that process, makes it more difficult. And there's many different types of MTHFR variations, but about half the population has them. I have one of them too. But if that folic acid is not converted and made into a usable form, it just builds up in your bloodstream and it builds up in your body. They call it unmetabolized folic acid, or UMFA, in the research. And there's some questions as to whether that's contributing to adverse health outcomes. And this is not new, by the way. I mean, we've been talking about this for well over 20 years in the literature. So people saying that this is like a new thing, it is not. It has been actively debated for a long time, because we started seeing a rise in certain things, like certain cancers that we didn't see before mandatory folic acid fortification of the food supply went into effect. So, my opinion is that we should be optimizing the amount of food folate that we consume, whole food sources. I already named them earlier. We should, if we're supplementing, choose a form of folate that the body can readily metabolize, regardless of what our genetics are, because most people don't know their MTHFR status, whether they have a variation or not. So I prefer to supplement with either methylfolate or another form. Calcium folinate isn't just one step removed from methylfolate, more easy for your body to make that conversion. And for some individuals, they actually do get adverse health effects if they're taking in too much folic acid, whether that's from a, supplement, prenatal vitamin, separate folic acid supplement, or from fortified foods. Some people don't have much of an issue metabolizing it. Other people, it's a major challenge and they get a lot of adverse health effects. So that's it in a nutshell. I do have like a very detailed article on my website on this. And because it is so controversial, I also teach like a 2-hour professional level webinar on folate and methylation as it relates to fertility and pregnancy over at the Women's Health Nutrition Academy, if people really want to get into the weeds on it.
Dive into it. Awesome. Thanks for explaining that. I think that'll be super helpful. So once someone is pregnant, that's when a lot of advice starts to come in of what we can do, what we can't do, both with nutrition and exercise too. And a lot of it is outdated or oversimplified. So can you explain what mistakes you often see? I don't want to say mistakes, but things that maybe women are focusing on nutritionally during this period when they maybe should focus on something else?
I'd say the biggest thing that I see is women focusing on what they should avoid instead of what things to consume more of. And this is not really their fault. I think that fear is often instilled by their healthcare practitioners, and a lot of the information that health practitioners are given on prenatal nutrition is really, really basic. You know, take a folic acid supplement, which, as I just explained, I disagree with. You know, avoid alcohol. And here's this long list of foods to avoid from a food safety perspective. There's a chance that you could get a foodborne illness from it. So they give you this long list of foods typically to not eat. And there's not much discussion about what you should eat more of. Nor is there much discussion in terms of the, you know, food safety aspect of kind of a risk benefit equation of like, okay, if we have taken out this huge list of foods, then what's the nutritional consequence of that? And there's actually been several papers out of Australia that's looked at this in terms of women who avoid foods that are at risk of listeria contamination, which often are top of the list things that they tell you to avoid, and like what is their diet quality and their nutrient intake. And pretty consistently, the more strictly they adhere to listeria avoiding food lists, the lower their nutrient intake, the lower their diet quality. So we kind of have to look at, okay, what is the relative risk? How risky are these foods actually in pregnancy? Are we just kind of like implementing these punitive guidelines out of an abundance of caution? It's like, well, if you're taking it from that angle, then technically we should take raw fruits and vegetables completely off of the table, because almost half of foodborne illness outbreaks in the US are from raw fruits and vegetables. Like, think about all the recalls on romaine lettuce and cantaloupe and whatever, you know, so it's like, okay. And then you look at, you know, where are the points at which foods get contaminated? And a lot of it is really happening at the food processing or preparation level, usually outside of the home. So I think we need a little more education on food safety as a whole, a little less fear-mongering on all these foods you have to avoid when the relative risk of getting really sick from them is pretty slim to none in most cases. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of food safety, but the huge lengthy lists of foods to avoid sets you up for pretty severe nutrient deficiencies that you're not going to make up for with a prenatal vitamin. So like, what's left when we've taken off like most of the animal proteins, a lot of the dairy products, eggs, fish is a bit separate, you know, the food safety concern and the mercury concerns. And now maybe if we're going to take it strictly raw fruits and vegetables, it's like, okay, what do you got left? Refined grain products, you know, those can also become contaminated in the factory. So sure, they're lower risk. These ultra processed foods might be lower risk for, you know, food safety concerns, but then your diet quality is terrible. Your nutrient intake is terrible. And now your baby's at risk for all sorts of adverse outcomes because your blood sugar is super high. You're not eating enough choline, not enough DHA, not enough protein, and the list goes on. So we just need, I think, a more, you know, nuanced conversation about it. It's really hard to guarantee whether any food is safe or unsafe. And so let's just be logical about it and help women, you know, make logical choices from a food safety perspective without being overly restrictive.
I think that's super helpful because, yeah, if especially in that period when you're growing a human and you need all of those nutrients, and let's say you are sick or once you get over that or whatever, those have big consequences. I think one common one I heard when I was pregnant were about the eggs. And I regularly had like over easy, over medium eggs, scrambled eggs, whatever, right? But like if you don't fully cook the egg, like your chance of, I'm like, well, I'm getting high quality eggs. I think I'm okay. And I want to make sure that I'm getting these nutrients from food as much as I can. And so you're right. And I'm thinking of after I had my baby girl, so my daughter is 2.5, and after I had my first doctor's appointment, right? When I'm pregnant, they give you this big packet of information, and most of it is what you can't do, especially when it comes to nutrition. And like when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, okay, like whatever. But now thinking back, I think that's a great opportunity I can work with like locally It's just giving me some ideas like, okay, how can we improve this a little bit? Because it is kind of scary for a lot of women. And then they just go to the processed foods or eating out, and that's not going to be good for them or for baby. So that's great. And then a lot of the foods you mentioned earlier, of course, are going to be the same thing that going to want to be eating when we're pregnant, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Pregnant and postpartum. The specific areas you're focusing on and the amount will shift, but same overall, like real whole foods diet is healthy across the lifespan at all ages, right?
Yes. Quick pause before we jump into the rest of this episode. If you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I want to feel stronger, I want to have more energy and actually fuel my body better as a busy mom, I've got just the thing for you, mama. I created a free guide, 5 protein-packed snacks every mom needs. These are simple, realistic snack ideas to help you boost your energy, stay full longer, and actually support your workouts and your recovery. Because let's be real, we don't have time for complicated. You can grab it at wellnessbyval.com/protein snack guide. The link is also in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the episode. So when you have a mama who's pregnant and she's craving certain things, are these cravings telling you as a dietitian anything specific? We can get into specific ones, or if you have some examples.
Yes, sometimes they do. So I think we need to get curious about food cravings and what might be underlying them. There's certainly cases where I think there is a nutritional need that is driving the craving. So cravings for salty foods, pickles, olives, chips, probably need more sodium, right? And sodium, they don't want to, the guidelines don't say this, but I can tell you sodium needs do increase during pregnancy, because guess what? You have a whole bunch of extra fluids on board. Your blood volume is 50% higher. You have amniotic fluid. And if you look at labs and pregnant women in general, they're more often low in sodium. They're hyponatremic rather than high in sodium. So salt can certainly be something that drives cravings. I've seen in women who previously maybe were vegetarian or vegan, they have like undeniable cravings for like a burger or steak. Or I even talked to one vegan woman who her 3 cravings were oysters, eggs, and bone broth. I was like, and in the first trimester too, right? Which is a bit unusual. A lot of times in the first trimester, some of the animal foods can be unappealing. And to her, like her body must have really needed it because those were the main things that she was craving. I do think there can be cravings that are not from a nutritional need, but more so maybe like an emotional standpoint. Like I'm really, you're craving comfort. So you're craving your mom's mac and cheese. Maybe it's possible there's something in there your body needs nutritionally, but maybe you're also craving that sort of comfort and hominess. There can also be cravings that are driven simply by food manufacturers designing their foods to be highly addictive. I mean, they call it the bliss point. They get the amount of salt and sugar and fat and natural flavors at just the right place so that you want to keep eating and keep eating and keep eating. I can also see cravings driven by, blood sugar and insulin imbalances. So if your blood sugar is on a big roller coaster, some of these cravings for sweet, starchy, carby foods, especially the ultra-processed ones, can simply be driven by a physiologic dip in your blood sugar that your body senses as we don't have enough energy and we need quick energy. Well, what's the quickest energy source? Sugar and carbs. So you can kind of be on this roller coaster where it's not necessarily your body needing you to eat more Doritos. It's a blood sugar imbalance that's driving it. And so you can kind of interrupt that by focusing more on high protein foods, getting enough fat, getting enough produce to keep your body fuller for longer and keep your blood sugar more stable versus just relying on carbs and carbs and carbs and more carbs. It's a bit of a hamster wheel when you get on that path.
Thanks for explaining that. And I do like how you said getting curious and really talking, like, of course, if it's a dietitian or a provider, talking with their clients and even with yourself as a mom, asking yourself, okay, well, why am I craving this? Is it something physically? Is it something emotionally? Diving a little bit deeper because that can give us some more information. And in terms of blood sugar, I think this is a really good segue into talking about blood sugar. So a lot of moms or even people, they may think, I don't have to pay attention to blood sugar because I don't have diabetes, or my fasting glucose, my hemoglobin A1C is perfect pre-pregnancy. So I don't really need to focus on that, or it's just not something that they're thinking about. Can you explain why, even if you don't have diabetes or gestational diabetes while you're pregnant, why blood sugar matters even outside of this diagnosis?
So blood sugar is related to, just about everything. We don't always see blood sugar imbalances right away because our body is so obsessive about keeping our blood sugar in a really tight range that you can have all sorts of other things out of whack behind the scenes. Like your insulin levels could be sky high, but it's maintaining your blood sugar in this tight range until that happens year after year after year after year after year. And then your pancreas is exhausted and the insulin resistance is so bad that it's manifesting in, high blood pressure and metabolic syndrome and all sorts of other issues. So unless we're testing insulin levels, and that's something that you can test it in pregnancy, but there's no reference ranges in pregnancy. So we're talking like preconception. If you wanted to get a picture of what's really going on with your blood sugar, you would want to also test your insulin levels, not just your blood sugar, to see what's happening. From even before pregnancy, it's playing a role in things. So it's playing a role in your fertility, in your the function of your ovaries, the health of your eggs, your likelihood of conception. So they've looked at women who are trying to conceive, who don't have any overt blood sugar issues that they know about, and women whose blood sugar average is higher than others in the group, even if it's still technically in the normal, not quite pre-diabetic range, they have a longer time, takes longer for them to conceive than the ones whose blood sugar averages in the low normal range. Okay. Then when it comes to pregnancy itself, even before they're even screening you for gestational diabetes, there's a higher risk of certain congenital anomalies if your blood sugar is on the higher level, such as congenital heart defects. That is a known independent risk factor. Neural tube defects are another one. The further along you get in pregnancy, the risks are a little different because the organs are all formed in the first 8 weeks. So congenital anomalies are all something that happens very early on, but baby's growth can be impacted by high blood sugar levels. The level of inflammation in your body is often reflective of blood sugar levels. So the higher your blood sugar is on average, the more inflammation you tend to have. The higher your insulin levels, the more fluid retention. So we see like polyhydramnios, when you have like excessive amniotic fluid, it's tightly correlated to blood sugar and insulin levels in the mom. Even if they're not picked up, like they passed their gestational diabetes screening, that'll show up as polyhydramnios. We see a higher risk of preeclampsia in the women who have higher blood sugar and insulin levels. And then as for baby, of course, like there's the whole reason that we're, concerned about gestational diabetes and that treating it and keeping blood sugar in range, even if it's only for one trimester of pregnancy, is worthwhile, is because it improves outcomes for the babies. So they grow at a more steady rate. Their body composition is more favorable. So if blood sugar is high, maternal insulin doesn't cross over the placenta. So the baby actually starts producing high amounts of insulin, and they're storing that extra glucose as fat. So when they're born, their body composition is a higher percent body fat than is average, and they're less, you could say, metabolically flexible. They're less able to switch between burning different fuel types. And this is not great because physiologically babies are really designed to be more, they're flexible. They can use different fuels, but in late gestation and early infancy, like especially in that first month, they're very much in a fat burning, they're in a ketogenic state. And so when they've just been on this like constant drip of sugar the entire pregnancy, they can have more challenges adapting outside of the womb. They're more likely to go hypoglycemic after birth because, hey, you've cut that umbilical cord, that constant sugar supply has stopped, but that baby's body is accustomed to a certain amount coming in at all times. And so their insulin levels are really high. Their blood sugar bottoms out. And I mean, you probably know, but that can be severe. There can be severe consequences to that. Sometimes they need to be in the NICU for a while to stabilize, right? So we want to be exposing this baby to an environment of healthy blood sugar levels so that their pancreas isn't overworked. And, it goes beyond just the immediate during pregnancy or immediate postpartum, but we want to think long-term. These babies exposed to high blood sugar levels across gestation, their risk of type 2 diabetes is anywhere from 6 to 19-fold higher than somebody whose blood sugar was not consistently high in pregnancy. So we can make a really big impact on that child's metabolic health just by the way that we're managing our blood sugar levels in pregnancy. So I just highly encourage everybody to just think about it. Even if you are super healthy, like it still is worthwhile to be thinking about your blood sugar. And even if you want to go beyond all of these scary adverse outcomes, simply from a standpoint of you want to feel good and have consistent energy levels throughout the day, you will feel better if your blood sugar is not on a crazy roller coaster all day long. And it really doesn't take all that much for the average person to feel the difference. And it doesn't take that many changes to see this. I mean, it can be as simple as eating a more protein forward breakfast instead of breakfast cereal or oatmeal or toast or an all fruit smoothie, right? You start your day with eggs or Greek yogurt or cottage cheese or something like that. You'll see a dramatic difference in your energy levels, your satiety, your not having that 2 p.m. afternoon slump.
Yeah.
Pregnant or not, you can really feel the difference.
Yeah, it's big. It's something to pay attention to. And with that, you mentioned earlier, we would balance our carbs with all of those foods, the protein, the fat, the fiber. I was just talking with a client yesterday, and we were talking about overall nutrition and their lifestyle related to exercise. And they mentioned, well, on the days that I don't run in the morning, I won't have the eggs. I'll just have the bagel, the granola, the orange juice. And so all of those things, I was thinking, okay, even if you don't run, we want those eggs and maybe still kind of balance those other things out, because even though you don't have diabetes, prediabetes, gestational diabetes, blood sugar is still going to be really important for how you're feeling, as you mentioned, but also if you're thinking long term too, because if you're doing this day after day after day, year after year, there are going to be consequences, right? And you're going to feel that, and it's going to impact every single system in the body. Now, typically during pregnancy, we test for gestational diabetes around in the second trimester. Do you think that should be sooner, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so typically they do a glucose tolerance test at 24 to 28 weeks. That's the standard guidelines. There have been a number of organizations, including the one that I used to work for, the California Diabetes and Pregnancy Program, that advocate for earlier screening because we can often catch it ahead of time. So what we're learning is there's different subtypes of gestational diabetes, and it's really the minority of cases where it is something that purely develops in the late second, early third trimester as a result of changes in the placenta and maternal body composition. Those cases exist. They are a small subset of most cases. Most cases we're finding have a pre-diabetic component, or at least some level of mild insulin resistance from preconception. And you can test for this in a number of ways. One of them, the easiest, lowest intervention, it's just a check on the lab slip, and you get it with your regular first trimester blood draw, is testing a hemoglobin A1C. Now, A1C is not perfect by any means, but it roughly gives you a snapshot of your average blood sugar over the past couple months. Now, when you're testing in the first trimester, this is before the physiologic insulin resistance has set in. It's before the placenta is even fully formed. You can't blame placental hormones yet, right? So if your A1C is coming out in the pre-diabetic range at that stage, there was a blood sugar insulin issue preconception that was not caught. And so in our clinic, we did that, and we would screen first trimester everybody universally. And if your A1C came out high, you were treated as if you had gestational diabetes for the remainder of pregnancy. And there have been a number of studies that have looked at validating A1C and which level should be the cutoff, but it's highly, highly predictive that if you have an A1C in the pre-diabetic range, the chances that if you take a glucose tolerance test, you will fail that test are very high. Like by some studies, it's 98%. So we, in my opinion, should be screening earlier. You can do a glucose tolerance test early on. There's all sorts of different options for screening early, but certainly if anybody has notable risk factors, I think it is, a good idea to test early. And one of the risk factors for gestational diabetes, I'm just going to lay this out because people think that it's only certain things, like maybe you're inactive or you're overweight or there's a family history of diabetes. Those are all legitimate concerns, but even being pregnant over the age of 25 is an independent risk factor for gestational diabetes, which is probably most people listening who are pregnant right now fall into that category. So, it's not a bad idea. And A1C is not even a fasted test. It'll just give you some indication of where your blood sugar was at coming into pregnancy.
Yeah, and why not add it to everything else that you're having to get done when you're first meeting the doctor anyways. And then in that preconception time, if you are thinking like, hey, you know what, I want to try and have a baby in a few months or in 5 months or next year, great time to add that to your annual test along with insulin. Thanks for explaining that. Let's shift to the postpartum period where I like to focus a lot on, because most moms are often neglected, right? During pregnancy, of course, we're going to our doctor's appointments, and then depending what else is going on, we may have more of those types of appointments. But then once we have our baby, all of the attention is to baby, rightly so, right? We have this new baby, we're so excited, we want to keep them healthy. But a lot of the times we're often neglected, and especially for first-time moms, and even if it's your second or your third, right? Like every pregnancy, every postpartum journey is going to be different. Like you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes if we're not thinking about that, it can kind of come back and it can just be very overwhelming and a time where we feel very alone. So when we're talking, and I like how you mentioned this in your book as well, when we're focusing on the postpartum period, but you said nutritionally overall, especially across the lifespan from preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum, we're still going to be focusing on the same thing nutritionally, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So any needs that are going to increase, a lot of the times moms may want to start losing weight. So they may cut back on calories, or they may cut back on certain things. Are there specific things that are actually going to increase after you have your baby?
Yeah. So one of the reasons I put in a postpartum chapter in Real Food for Pregnancy was because I didn't feel like I was adequately prepared for postpartum. And I had counseled at that point hundreds of women through their pregnancies, and I would see them postpartum as well. And beyond the, eat an extra 500 calories a day because you're nursing and burning more energy, there really wasn't a whole lot. And so I was kind of shocked by, A, how hungry I was, but B, you really don't have the wherewithal as a new mom, the energy, time, free hands to be cooking food for yourself right away, right? And so there's a lot we can learn from other cultures in how they support new moms. And oftentimes there is an elder female who either lives with you or you live with them for a period of time, and they cook and prepare all your food and take care of your housework so you can rest and recover and receive support. So we kind of have to work a little bit overtime to plan for that. It's kind of unfair, but it's where we're at. And it's better off that you do some planning ahead of time than be blindsided by it after the fact. But yes, your calorie needs increase, your protein requirements increase. New research came out on that a couple years back. Protein needs are higher than a typical female athlete. And that study was actually done at 3 to 6 months postpartum in exclusively breastfeeding women. So I can imagine in the first 0 to 3 months postpartum, those needs are substantially higher. We do know the needs for a number of different micronutrients also skyrocket in early postpartum. Vitamin A is one of them. Needs go way up for vitamin A. Choline needs increase. Vitamin B12 needs increase. We need more DHA. So there's a need for more nutrient density. Like there is never a time in your life where you will need more food and more nutrients than early postpartum. And this is not the message that a lot of women are getting. We think that all the work is pretty much done in pregnancy. Nothing can be more metabolically demanding than the third trimester of pregnancy, right? Oh, wait, now like the baby, you're still feeding the baby. The baby's just outside of your body. So yes, you're burning a lot more energy in making milk, and the higher calorie needs are purely from the standpoint of what's needed for milk production. They're not accounting for, the data does not exist on what is actually the calorie burn on an early postpartum mom when you're recovering from birth. Think about the woman who's had a 24-hour or 48-hour labor. Think about the mom who maybe had a C-section. What if she had a C-section after a really long labor? So now you have the compounding effect of huge physical energy expenditure, like a marathon's worth of energy expenditure. And then you also have major abdominal surgery on top of it. So we need to account for how much energy was burned during the labor process. So I know for myself, my first birth was kind of long, almost a whole day of labor, but a natural birth. And my second was a pretty quick labor, like 3 hours, also home birth, and the difference in my hunger levels was extreme. Like with my firstborn, I was so hungry early postpartum. With my second, yes, I was hungry, but it was nowhere near the level of having to recover from a full day of physical expenditure, especially because I'm not a person who can really eat much during labor, like kind of get nauseous. And so, yeah, there was a lot more to recover from that first time versus the second time. So we need to be considering, like, how did labor go down? Is there a surgical wound, an episiotomy, a tear? Like that's also going to increase nutritional requirements during that time. Are you nursing? Are you not nursing? Like all of that can play into the energy needs and protein needs.
Definitely. I had a long labor too. I had a 19-hour labor, and it started like at 11:30 at night. And so I didn't sleep, and I was exhausted, and I did everything, I went to the hospital, but I try to do everything, without medication, just because that's something that I wanted to do. I'm like, if I can do this in intense exercise, I want to be able to experience this, right? So hardest workout of my life.
Yeah.
And it was hard for me to eat. I remember my husband trying to feed me like little stinger gummies, like just trying to get something in me. And I'm like, okay. But after, I was just like you, I was give me anything and everything. And the kitchen was closed. Luckily I packed snacks. So I'm just inhaling everything. And I even remember, after being home for a while, how hungry I was. And luckily we prepped, we had both of our parents to help us with all of that. And just thinking about like, whoa, like I need a lot, because not only am I feeding my baby, as you said, but I have to physically repair. And I always explain this on the show, how after, I think it was like a few weeks after, but it was like I was in a body cast, like my calves, like I had no muscle. I'm like, what is happening? Oh my gosh, I have a problem with my protein. It was so interesting. So I think that is good to for moms to think about and plan ahead, right? You're going to be postpartum, whether it's your first, your third, whatever. Let's plan ahead. Let's try to be as successful as we can, because we don't have, a lot of moms may not have the help, or they may have to go back to work, unfortunately. We don't have like that traditional lying in period that other cultures have, which is great, right? But we have to be able to plan for that. So thanks for explaining that. I think that's super helpful. So before we kind of like wrap up with everything, what I want to end with something kind of memorable for moms. So what is the biggest nutrition myth in fertility, pregnancy, or postpartum that you love to bust? And you may have already busted it, but we'll see.
Biggest myth. It's so hard to choose. If it's encompassing all three of the stages, it would be the concept that we need to eat less meat or limit our intake of animal foods. I'm choosing that one because that one is most pertinent for fertility, especially. But then our protein needs further increase in pregnancy, and then they skyrocket postpartum. And you're going to feel like garbage if you're not eating a large amount of high quality protein, and you get high quality protein from animal foods.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing a downtrend in this now. And I'm hearing from more ex-vegetarians and vegans now than I did 5 years ago. And someone actually sent me like the Google search history on ex-vegetarians and ex-vegans in the last, like, since 2004. And it's like steadily going up, so that the tides are turning. Beyond Meat is beyond bankrupt. There's fewer people going for that, diet type now, or they've tried it and seen for themselves how it feels. But from a fertility perspective, there's a lot of lies out there that eating meat is going to harm fertility. We debunked that very thoroughly in chapter 5 of Real Food for Fertility. If you haven't read that book, please do. But we also need to acknowledge the higher demands for a lot of the nutrients we're getting from animal proteins throughout the lifespan, pregnancy and postpartum especially. So B12, choline, iron, zinc, taurine, carnitine, creatine, selenium. There's like a huge number of nutrients that we get either more of or primarily from animal proteins, and women especially can really benefit from it. So I'm relieved to see a downturn in the trend, but there's still a lot more work needed. I mean, I think for decades, women have been limiting their consumption, especially of red meat. For a while, it was egg yolks. And then, early 2000s and beyond, it became, everybody needs to go plant-based.
Yep.
And it's been disastrous for our hormones and fertility. So I'm relieved to see that starting to shift.
I am too. Lily, can you explain where people and listeners can find you and get more information if they want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to find me is my website, lilynicholsrdn.com. There's quite a few articles up there. Everything's free. There's no paywall. So search my blog. There's one that I really wanted to mention called Real Food Postpartum Recovery Meals that links out to like 50 plus recipes and gives you, freezer meal tips and all sorts of things related to our conversation on postpartum recovery. Up there, you can also get a free chapter of Real Food for Pregnancy if you haven't read it yet. There's just a tab for a whole bunch of freebies, so have at it. And then as for social media land, you can find me at Lily Nichols RDN on Instagram is where I most often hang out, but I'm on the other platforms too.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to put all of that in the show notes. So go to the show notes, get that information, check out Lily's Instagram and blog and her amazing books, and you won't regret it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you loved this episode as much as I did. Lily shared so many powerful insights, but she also made it feel just more doable and less overwhelming, which we need as busy moms. Be sure to check out the show notes to find out how you can connect with Lily, to learn more about her books, follow her on social media. You're not going to regret it. I also included a link to one of her blogs that I truly love. Check that out. And if this episode helped you, I would love if you took 30 seconds to leave a review or share it to your social media, tag me at wellnessbyval_, or share it with a mama who you think could truly benefit from this information. I truly appreciate the support, and this helps get the show into more hands of mamas who need this information. Thank you so much, mama. Thanks for being here. Stay strong, stay nourished, and I'll talk to you next week. Hey mama, I hope you loved today's episode. If you got something out of it or simply enjoyed listening, would you please take 30 seconds to share it with another mom who could use the support? And if you haven't yet, I would be so grateful if you could leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. It truly means the world to me, and it helps the show reach more amazing moms like you. All right, time to go chase my toddler around. Stay strong and nourished, and I'll be back on Monday with another episode. Talk soon.